Hey everyone, welcome back to Shutter Magazine. I'm Dustin Lucas, and today I'm excited to talk to you about my 7-part series, How to Step Up Your Lightroom Game. As photographers, we're always looking for the best ways to manage, edit, export, deliver files, right? Well, it's no surprise that the Adobe ecosystem is the standard for photographers and raw processing. So if I want to take hundreds of thousands of images through a program, export them out, edit, post, deliver, it's Lightroom. Lightroom is a no-brainer for me. I'm working with hundreds of thousands of files in a single year. I want to work in one space, one place where everything is simple and easy for me to get my files and do what I need to. So I'm going to take you through this 7-part series to show you how to do that, right? The best ways to use Lightroom, the best ways and to avoid catastrophes, because that's what you want to do, right? You want things to be simple, but you want to be safe. You want to be able to access your files all the time, but you also want to make sure you can deliver them as fast and as efficient as possible. That's what I'm going to walk you through in this 7-part series. Okay, so part 1 is going to be storing and managing files. It might be the most boring part of this 7-part series, but I will tell you it's the most unestimated one many photographers make. They get an external hard drive, they put their RAWs on it, they start working on a laptop, boom, the hard drive drops to the ground and all their RAWs are gone. Now they're paying thousands of dollars to get recovery services happening. Now the RAWs are named differently. Now everything is thrown off. Your 3 to 4 week delivery turns into a 6 to 8 week delivery and you're screwed, right? So storing and managing files is going to be part 1, which I'm going to be talking to you about in this article. Part 2 for next month is going to be managing catalogs, how to manage your catalogs and make things simple. Part 3 is going to be culling and sorting files. Yes, I said it. We're going to be culling and selecting files in Lightroom. So no longer do you need to use Photo Mechanic, do you need to use a third-party program. We're going to keep everything in Lightroom, work in one space. Part 4 is going to be advanced color correction, right? So we're not just talking about temperature and tint. We're going to be talking about the basic panel, HSL, how to really dial in on color at a simple to an advanced way. Part 5 is going to be an entire creative workflow. What does that mean? Well, color profiles, presets, editing in Photoshop, bringing your files back into Lightroom, all of that stuff is workflow. And we're going to be talking about how to be creative inside and outside of Lightroom. Part 6 is going to be finalizing files. Okay, applying keywords, sorting, syncing capture time, a more thorough way to get your files ready for delivery. So we're talking about exporting files, we're talking about running scripts and Photoshop, all that good stuff. Part 7 is going to be life after Lightroom. So what happens when you're done exporting your images? What's next? How to keep everything organized. We're going to walk through that last step of life after Lightroom. So now we're ready to jump into storage, and more specifically file storage, and how to create a safe and secure way to store your files. All right, when it comes to file storage, there is nothing more underestimated in an average photographer studio than this. It's more than just having an external hard drive. It's more than having a cloud storage plan. You really need to have a 3, 2, 1 backup plan. I'll get more into what that means, but high level, it means you need to have 3 copies of the same file. 2 of those need to be on separate on-site drives, and one of the third copy needs to be offsite, cloud storage, maybe storing something at home versus at the studio. So getting back to working in a safe and secure storage solution environment, you're going to hear RAID a lot. That acronym just basically means a bunch of disks that are set up to randomly or redundantly create copies onto multiple disks, right? So you're going to see, maybe you've purchased a brand, or maybe you bought a Drobo, right? So you might be thinking, don't worry, I bought a Drobo, I'm fine. Some of you out there might be thinking, I'm making up words. This is a proprietary brand. They make storage, RAID storage solutions for you. That makes it a little more appealing. It's all sort of done, ready to go for you out of the box. But that would just be one of 3 copies. Just because you have a RAID does not mean it's a backup. I repeat, RAID is not a backup. A backup is 3 separate copies on 3 separate apparatuses that you want to use. So jumping into storage, let's talk about more specifically what RAID is. So you have multiple different levels of RAIDs, right? JBOD, just a bunch of disks. What's the advantage of this? Well, you're going to be able to use all the disks that you purchase. Now let's take a step back. You're thinking disks, is this hard drives? Is this local? Is this an external hard drive? Let's start there, right? So in looking at different solutions, what you want to make sure is that you're working with the fastest connectivity. That means that if you're working with a external hard drive that's directly connected to your computer, like I have here, right? So I have these hard drives here that are connected directly to my computer. These are external hard drives, 2 separate ones, right? That's a direct attached storage, or DAS for short. Now, if you want to work with something on a network or something more kind of server level, you can buy a NAS system, which is a network attached storage. It means that I can go into a VPN, I can use screen sharing software, I can log into an address of a specific, you know, a specific NAS server or computer that I can access those files while I'm traveling or remote. Those are the 2 biggest differences between those types of systems, right? But they're both going to be on site. So in looking at this diagram here, I just want to go through connectivity, because the biggest thing when you're accessing raw files is speed. And if they're on an external hard drive, you know they're going to be slower than if you have them on your local hard drive or your computer's main drive, which is likely an SSD. That's going to be lightning fast. Don't get me wrong, solid state drives are great, but you don't want to store things on your local drives. These are raw files. You want them on external drives. You want to have backups. So you want to be thinking about, USB 3.0, which has become the standard for high speed. It's just super slow. As you look at the difference between 3.0 versus 3.1 versus the different Thunderbolts, whether you're working on Apple or not, doesn't matter. You want to make sure you're at least working on USB 3.1. It's pretty affordable. You can buy hard drive enclosures with 2, 4, 5, 10 disks, 8 disks to put into. We'll get into RAIDs next, but these things to take into consideration. This doesn't mean 10 gigabytes a second. So you're thinking, well, 5 gigabytes is just fast enough for me. That's gigabits. So with an actual USB 3.0, you're going to get much slower speeds than that. Just to give you perspective, 10 gigabits equals 1.25 gigabytes per second. So when you're working with RAW files, when you're working with digital SLRs and mirrorless cameras, you know those files are 30, 40, 50, sometimes 80 megabytes a piece. They're huge. You need a lot of space. You need high speed. These kind of things are important. So if you can get USB 3 or Thunderbolt 3, you're going to be in much better, much better playing field between 1.25 gigs per second and 5 gigabytes per second. Don't be fooled by these 40 gigabits. This doesn't actually mean specific data that's going to be transferring. So let's jump into RAID. What the hell does RAID mean? I'm going to go down the most common ones, JBOD, which just means just a bunch of disks. So disk number 1, disk number 2, disk number 3. The way this writes is whether you're working with 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 disks, it's going to write all the data to disk 1. When that fills up, it's going to go to disk 2, then go to disk 3 to disk 4. The advantage of this is you get the full storage capacity of all 5 of your disks. So if each of these are 1 terabyte, you'll have a 5 terabyte drive. And the beauty is that you can keep adding other disks to this to make it larger as you go along. So it's expandable without you having to recreate. Now, RAID 0, which is the very similar thing, it's going to add up all 5 disks, but it's not going to allow you to expand a disk without you recreating a RAID 0. So you're going to have the fastest working drive out of a RAID 0, but if one of these goes down, you lose all of your data and nothing is recoverable. It's a pretty stupid version of RAID, in my opinion. I would recommend RAID 10, which we'll get to in just a second. RAID 1 makes an exact copy. Disk 1 copies the exact amount of information on disk 2. What does that mean? Disk 1 goes down, you're not shit out of luck. Disk 2 is still good. You can put a new disk in your RAID enclosure, your hard drive, so to speak, your external hard drive, and it will rebuild all of the data from disk 2 back onto disk 1. So the beauty of working with a RAID 10 is it creates this in multiple RAID 1 environments. So in the case that you're working with 4 disks and one of these goes down, this RAID 1 system here will copy onto this RAID 1 system. So really it's 2 RAID 1s into one. So it's a RAID 1 plus a 0. They just call that RAID 10. This is the best of both worlds for performance, but also for protecting your data, right? So we're just talking about one type of storage. This is one device. You still need to have a separate external hard drive. You don't need to go to the trouble of having another RAID system. You could probably just have a large storage device, a large external hard drive, just something for cold storage. In the case that this goes to shit, you have everything else in-house. Hopefully you're following me with that. It's a lot of kind of tech jargon, but RAID, it's really simple. I recommend RAID 10. I recommend getting a hard drive enclosure for at least 4 disks and getting a USB 3.1 connection. I'm pretty sure you can get all that between 100 and 200 bucks. Don't be cheap. Spend money and invest. If you want to make it really simple on yourself and you have a larger budget in the thousands of dollars, I highly recommend going to companies like G-Tech or Pegasus. There's a bunch of different hard drive RAID companies out there that this is what they do for a living. So if you just want to pay somebody else to set it up for you, they ship it to you, you pull out of the box and use it. I highly recommend going that route. 8 terabyte, 16 terabyte, 24 terabyte, huge storage options. Okay, great. We're done talking about storage. Let's jump into backup and what a 3-2-1 backup plan looks like. All right, so your backup plan consists of 3 copies, 2 on-site, 1 off-site. So what I thought was really funny, and I want to repeat myself again as this little graphic here shows you, RAID is not a backup, or in this case, RAID is no backup. I think it's a funny thing to remember, but it's something you need to live by. And what I mean by that is RAID is one copy of your files. I don't care if you're using a RAID 10, a JBOD, a RAID 0, a RAID 5. It doesn't matter. It's not a backup. Backup means that you're using a separate external device to back up another copy of your files. If there's one cord coming into your computer, that is one device. It's simple, right? So you can daisy chain with Thunderbolt. You can have 10 port USB hubs. You can buy 10 external 3 USB hard drives. That's fine. Create separate copies. You're going to have 2. You need 2 of those on site, which means with you where you're working. That's the simplest way to explain it. So going to the 3-2-1 backup plan, it's 3 copies, 2 on site, 1 off site. So the most important part of this is that you stick to this plan and you do it every time. So we're going to get into Lightroom and talk about how you can do this, how you can create these backups. We can get there in just a moment. But the most important thing is when it comes to storage and being safe and having data integrity is following this plan. So off-site storage, that can be cloud storage. So whether you're using Microsoft's ON1 or OneDrive, excuse me, cloud, that's Google Drive. There's Amazon Photos, which is for Prime members free. Works better for more personal. I wouldn't use your business to back RAWs up on. There's Backblaze. There's Carbonite. There are a lot of different photographer specific storage. So you might be using Shootproof or Pixie Set or SmugMug, which is kind of a cloud storage for you, more for sharing files for your clients. That might work for JPEGs, which is great. So you always have the JPEG edited version for your clients. So having online proofing sites kind of work indirectly as a cloud storage for you. But what I'm talking about here is raw files. So for this offsite, it doesn't have to be cloud. It could be filling up a 2 terabyte hard drive, taking it to a bank, storing it in the vault. If you want to be that direct with your data integrity and saving things, you can have a NAS system at home that syncs with all of your studio hard drives where you're working your photography studio. That's perfect for offsite. It automatically backs it up. It's remote. It's storing it in a separate place. You can physically take a hard drive with you from work to home, back it up there. If you want to do that route, I don't recommend hauling hard drives back and forth, but for something offsite, it's a great way. In case you have a catastrophe, I'm not saying this to scare anyone, but you are going to have something stolen from you. You are going to have property damage in some way where you're going to lose those drives and wonder, why didn't I store it somewhere else? It just makes sense. So 3-2-1 backup plan. It's simple. Follow something and stick to it. Now we're ready to move into Lightroom. We're going to create a catalog, and I'm going to talk to you about why working in one single catalog for the year is the best way to work. All right, now we're ready to get into Lightroom, finally, right? So I'm going to start by explaining why working in a master catalog or one single catalog for everything you shoot for an entire year is the most important way to work in Lightroom. Why is this important? Well, it's simple, everything is in one place, and it's easy to stick to a plan like that, right? So instead of having hundreds of catalogs for creating a catalog per session, that's crazy. I create one for the year. Everything that I import for my backup, it goes to one place. I even set in preferences for Lightroom to open up this catalog every time I work in Lightroom, right? So it's very important to make sure everything is simple. Trust me, nothing makes me happier when I get done with the shoot, getting the files into Lightroom and just getting started editing. And then you already screw up your backup plan, you screw up your organization and your sorting and your file management because you just want to get files into Lightroom and you think, it's just one time, and it happens over and over and over again. So stick to a plan, keep it simple, work in a master catalog, all right? So once we're ready to import, we're bringing all of our files from our wedding that we just shot directly into Lightroom. So you're gonna have a bunch of different sources or hard drives here listed, right? So we've got a Canon EOS, which is showing what looks like a memory card, right? And you might have multiple memory cards. So keep in mind, if it says devices up here or something different, I highly recommend you working from multiple sources. So you want to make sure as you're selecting these down here, you can actually select multiple hard drives. So if we have, um, you know, multiple memory cards here, so you see we can select multiple ones at a time and import them all at once. Now something you might be thinking about is, well, if I'm selecting from multiple cards, they might all have the same name, and I want to, I don't want to have multiple folders per memory card. That's crazy. I 100% agree. That's why you can start to, when you're bringing files in, we can choose copy. This is very important. We do not want to choose copy as DNG. This is as important as RAID is not a backup. Do not copy as a DNG. That means that your files are stuck in the Adobe ecosystem forever. If you're working in an older version of Lightroom and you can't see your raw files, update Lightroom. I mean, don't be stupid. You don't have to convert to DNGs, then to bring them in some older version of Lightroom. Keep your raws. Make sure you're copying the files, not creating DNGs. We don't want to move the files, and we're not adding, right? You're going to have to copy if you're coming from a memory card. You can't keep the files on the memory card. They got to go. So we're going to choose copy. And you're going to notice under file renaming, we can choose to rename files. So we can go in here and we can create a custom system altogether. Now, don't pay any attention to this raw. It's just going to keep whatever your extension is. Your CR2s for Canon are going to stay intact. what I would do for this is do an, the initials of the studio, underscore, and then a sequence of 4 numbers, and just insert that there. And I would click done. Now, this is assuming that these files are in sequential order that they're coming in. So with sorting, it's going to do it by capture time. So everything is shot and synced up already. So I don't have to worry about that up front with these images. Now, if you haven't synced cameras together or they're not sunk in capture time, that's something that you probably don't want to rename these files when they come in, because you're just going to have to rename again. But if they're the same names on multiple memory cards, it's going to be a requirement. So I'm going to go ahead and click off so it stops loading everything like that. So you can rename files. That's not an issue. The next thing that you're going to want to do is, when you're bringing files in, is pay attention to what you're doing here with previews. This is super important. So if you want to start calling and editing your photos right away, well, editing is a relative term. If you want to start calling and sorting your images, I definitely recommend choosing Embedded in Sidecar. It'll use those JPEG previews and work similarly as Photo Mechanic and some of those other programs that just require you to browse the images. We'll get to that later in part 3 for selecting and calling images. So if you want import to go its fastest, you can choose minimal. Worry about building standard previews and all that later. Building smart previews is the most important part here. It makes your catalog lightning fast, and it doesn't require you to have your RAWs connected, or if the RAWs are connected, it will be linked to the smart previews, making it run as fast as possible. Highly recommend smart previews. It's a no-brainer. The next thing you want to do is going down here to presets. Now, a lot of people bring their images into Lightroom with develop presets applied. I don't. It makes preview rendering slower, and it also doesn't let you ever get back to the raw data. That's the point of shooting in RAW. You want to see something untouched. That's the most important part. So I don't like to bring photos in with develop settings applied. Usually, you can maybe lens correction, things to fix some of those photographic problems, but lens correction isn't for every lens. Some lenses don't need it, so I don't apply anything at import because I want this to be smooth and fast. Now, destination, if you're not seeing this option, it's probably because you're on move or add, so make sure you're on copy here. That's very important. Now, destination, this is where you want the original source file to go to. So this is going to be your first hard drive, the first on-site drive, and then you can also choose backup here to choose where the second copy is going to go for your second on-site backup. Now, keep in mind, you can't choose the folders in here and renaming the same. So what you're going to have to do on this photo backup is you're going to have to create the same file structure and remember everything as you're going through this, which I think is very cumbersome. So what I like to do is I like to create all of these folders outside before I get into Lightroom. It's very important to do this. It makes everything super fast and super simple. So I've already kind of started some here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure this same file structure is going to show up on the backup drive as well. So let's see here. So if I want everything to start, this is very important to remember. If you want everything to kind of start with that same structure, we'll just copy that. We'll put that here. As well as on the photo backup, which will just take a minute here. So once I copy this data over, we'll be ready to bring our files in. All right, now that I have the same naming structure, I want to make sure that I'm choosing, let's see here, into one folder, and I'm going to choose on the photo hard drive exactly where I want this to save. So as I have weddings, I have the name of the wedding, I want these to go into the original file. So this is called a folder path here. We want to make sure it's the same on the destination drive as it will be on the backup hard drive. So as we want to go into photo backup, weddings, same thing. This is important because Lightroom works very specifically in paths. Um, so in order for all of your files to kind of follow that same path structure, you want all the folders to be named the same. Just keeps everything organized. Now that we're ready to go, we can click Import and wait for this to finish. All right, now we're ready to look at basic file management in Lightroom. Keep in mind, part 2 of this 7-part series is going to be how to manage your catalogs, but I'm going to show you the basics on what to do after import. So as we have all of our files, you're going to notice a panel on the left-hand side here. Now keep in mind, we're in the library module, so that's where all of your organization, sorting, viewing, metadata, all of that information is going to be accessible and editable. So on the left-hand side under the folders panel, this is going to be where our files are physically stored. So as you can see, we created the O1 underscore original underscore raws folder, right? So we select that folder name, and all of our files are here. Now if we right click on that, we can choose show parent folder, and you can start to see the breakdown of, okay, here's our wedding, specific wedding folder. Now I can do show parent folder, and you can see weddings, break it down. So as you can see, you can look at the parent folders just to make sure we're working in weddings, or if I want to see seniors and all that kind of stuff. But as you notice, not everything on my photo hard drive is showing up here, only because I've imported these raw files and Lightroom now sees this folder path. So if we want to create new folders, you have to do it in Lightroom. My biggest tip here is making sure when you're creating new files, you're moving files, all that kind of stuff, you want to do that in the master catalog. So under folders, once we select this parent folder for the wedding name, we can click plus and start to add subfolders. So this becomes very important when you want to create a selection folders, which again, part 3 we'll get to culling and selection, but it's good to see how you make these other folders. Because as we start to select files, right, we can now move them into a selects folder. And what that does is it's actually going to move the files now. We'll go into our folder here. We're going to go to photo hard drive, working, weddings, and you're going to see that now these folders are created. Same way when we add another subfolder, and say we want to add one for finals. So O3 underscore finals, and I usually do caps just because these are the ones that I'm going to access more often than the rest. So if I want to take, any sort of files here, and I want to add those to the finals, I can, right? So now we go back into Finder, and it's already creating these folders for us. So don't create them here in Finder, or if you're on a PC on File Explorer, do it in Lightroom. So we're going to do this same thing for all of our subfolders. So you can follow this same structure or create one for yourself. It doesn't matter. But for my next ones, let's see, I have finals. I do O4 creatives. Same thing. I will do another one for, let's see, blog. Nope. 05. And so on and so forth. So we can get back to this later on how to use these folders, how this works. But the next most important part of basic catalog management is using collections. So to break down the biggest difference between the folders panel and the collections panel is you can sort and store files either physically. Folders is going to physically move files as we saw here. These are no longer inside of the original folder here. So when you move the files around under folders, they actually move into the new folders. It doesn't create copies. It just takes that one single file and moves it. So that's something to keep in mind for backup purposes in the future. And to that point, it's very important as you're making these kind of adjustments that this main hard drive or the destination drive that we used when we imported, you want to make sure that is likely a RAID system, because if your files go down there, all of these backups, you want to make sure as you're creating backups, you're working in the most safe environment. When you're done here, of course, we can take all of these folders here, copy them, and paste them into the same structure here once we're done, right? So we want to make sure we're working in an environment where we're still backing things up, but it's going to require you, yes, Lightroom, a little bit of a requirement, unless you have an app that's running, which is probably a really good idea. You can have an app whenever changes are made to your main hard drive here, it automatically mirrors them onto another one. You can do that between two separate hard drives. That would be a good idea to do, just so that way when you're making these changes, they're backed up in two places on your two on-site backups as well as your off-site one. So it's definitely a big tip to run maybe a third-party backup, something beyond just Time Machine. Time Machine works okay, but you want them to go between multiple drives. Moving into collections. Collections are a virtual sorting system, and what that means is that you can take files, say from this original raw folder, and you can add them to collections, and they don't move your files. They just virtually sort them. So these are like virtual folders. These are more like digital or physical folders, moving files around. So it didn't move our originals out of here, which is great, and I can recall back to those. So things like print comp, blog, if you need to custom sort your images, you can create a reorder collection so that way you can move files around. But this is really good to have a print comp or an image comp one, so that way you can grab the best images from the wedding, store those later, so at the end of the year you can go through your 50, 100 best shots and not have to go through job by job to find them. Pretty awesome. Smart collections. This is a whole new sort of game changer for a lot of photographers. So what a smart collection is it is a way to automatically sort files based on specific parameters. Okay, what does that mean? Well, if I want to automatically have files sorted based on ratings or based on color labels and things like that, you can automatically do that by creating one called ratings, right? So you can do is greater than or equal to 5 stars. You can do based on flags. You can do color labels. You can do all kinds of stuff, right? This, in my opinion, doing it for ratings and things like that don't work as well for smart collections. I simply do that here, right? So if I go to the specific wedding and I want to go up to metadata or attributes, I can do all that there, right? So I'm not super worried about making those kind of adjustments or doing smart collections for that kind of stuff. It is kind of interesting though to use it for cropping if you want to do different develop options. So what this will do is we can create a smart collection for cropping, which I already have here. If we want to edit the smart collection, just to kind of show you if it's been cropped or not. So if I go in here, crop this image, let's say I want to do some straightening, pretty common. Move through a few images. You know, and I want to do these things. You can see they automatically just added to the cropping. So this is how the smart collection's working automatically. You can create them based on dimensions, which is pretty cool. So if you want to, let's see here, edit smart collection, you want to have it to where the shortest edge is greater than 4,000. That would be if you want to split between megapixel cameras. I mean, that starts to get very granular and very specific. So with the kind of automating and sorting, it just saves you some time. Smart previews are a great one to do it with. You can also do location, which is kind of cool. So if you want to do it based on a specific city or where you were at in another country, maybe if you're shooting there more frequently, all those images from that country and the GPS data will automatically load there. It's whatever you find is most useful to you. You can also go to ISO speed rating, which is nice. So if you want to break this down to um, if anything that's greater than 1600, save. Um, Now, of course, we're going to rename this to ISO 1600. And all of these automatically pop up, right? So pretty cool feature as well. So again, smart collections, automation, saving time. This is a basic level of how to use how to manage images, files in your catalog. But definitely stay tuned to part 2. We'll talk a little more about how to manage these catalogs and get more granular on how to better use catalogs in the Lightroom system. All right, so now that we're ready to wrap up part 1, storage and managing files, it's all about having a safe and secure way of storing your files, then having a backup plan, right? So we talked about the 3-2-1 plan, 3 copies of every RAW, 2 of those copies should be on site, 1 of those copies should be off site. That's the way that you can have your images the most secure and safe, but also have them accessible, right? So we talked about directly attached storage devices. We talked about network attached, whichever one makes the most sense for you. If you're not traveling a lot, if you're working from home and don't have a studio, cloud storage is a must for you. You're going to have two storage solutions at home. If you have a separate studio, you can use your home as your offsite. Makes it a little bit cheaper and easier and faster for backing up data, just because you're not having to upload it to a cloud storage solution. So all those kind of things are very important. Remember, Lightroom is your central hub for organization and file management. It is a digital asset manager. That means damn, right? So let Lightroom control, let Lightroom organize, and do all of your work moving, renaming files, any of that kind of stuff. You want to be doing that in Lightroom. That's so important. Beyond that, you want to be doing it in one place. That's why we created a master catalog for all of your work to live in. So the next wedding, senior, portrait, boudoir, family session I shoot, it's coming into this master catalog 2019. It's one place. It's the same catalog that opens up for me every time. So if you're using Bridge, you're using Adobe Camera Raw, you're using a different raw processing program, I can tell you that Lightroom is the perfect blend of organization, things like Bridge, things like Photo Mechanic, which will do some sorting and culling. It's super Lightroom fast. I'm not going to say Lightroom is as fast as Photo Mechanic, but when you're working in one place, I can tell you the headache and the hassle is removed. When you're working in one place, it makes it super simple. But Lightroom is just a supercharged version of Bridge plus Adobe Camera Raw. Meets efficiency, right? So there's no time better than now to take a jump, dive into Lightroom. Whether you've been working with it for a while or you're brand new to it, I promise you this 7-part series will be very helpful to you. You're going to learn some new stuff. You're also going to brush up on maybe some of your older knowledge of things that you haven't kind of gone back to in a while. I'm hoping to turn those light bulbs on for you. So bear with me. 7 parts. This is part 1. Part 2, next month, we're going to be talking about managing your Lightroom catalog. So everything you need to know in this Lightroom catalog before we get started sorting, selecting, and culling your images. That's all I have for you guys this month. Tune in next month.